very we are very sorry for the technical problems that we had, but everything is all right now, and I think that we can start. I'm again very happy to see you all in our second seminar for this year, and the third one from the project of the Department of International Relations, International Research University Higher School of Economics, the International Laboratory on World Order Studies and New Regionalism, and the Bulgarian Club in the University, the European Integration, an Eastern European aspect, as is supervised by Professor Alexander Lukin, where in few lectures we will try to present the most pressing issues of the European Union. My name is Stefan Stoyanov, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Bulgarian Club, and I'm going to be your host today. This seminar is going to be a little bit more different than the others because, well, first of all, the topic is very wide. And secondly, this seminar is also co-organized with the Middle East Club in our university, and we're very glad to see them among us. And thirdly, because we hope that this is going to be not something like a lecture, but more like a discussion between us. So feel free to express your thoughts with us in the chat section, especially if you're from the region. Today's guest is Ruslan Trad. He is a freelance columnist, journalist, and author focused on Syria, conflicts, hybrid warfare, and mercenaries. He's a former author in Foreign Policy Bulgaria and Goethe Institute. He's a member of the Association of European Journalists Bulgaria and co-founder of the Bulgarian Journal for Conflicts and Military History, Re Militari. Ruslan Trad was also a correspondent in Lebanon, Turkey, Iraqi Kurdistan, and Thailand for TEMA Weekly and the Bulgarian National Radio. He reported also from Tunisia and Saudi Arabia, and in 2014, he was awarded for his journalist work on refugee issue and Syria war coverage. In 2017, his first book on the Syrian Civil War, The Murder of a Revolution, was published in Bulgaria. And his second book on the Russian mercenaries, co-authored with the researcher Kiril Avramov, was published in 2020. He is frequently invited as a speaker at TRT World, Al Jazeera, Europost, The New Arab, BBC Persian, Express, Bild, and other world medias. We're also happy that the chairman of the Middle East Club, Amal Vildan, is also with us, and he's going to take a very active part in our discussion. He is on his master's study degree in international relations, European and Asian studies in our university. And I think we should not waste more time, and I'm very happy to give the floor to our lecturer, Ruslan Trad.
Thank you very much for this invitation. Privet here in Bulgaria is not so cold like in Russia, but it's enough to be not so comfortable. I hope that you are healthy and your family too. Thank you for this description of my work and what I do. Recently, I changed from journalism to more analytical work, but I'm not an academia person. So excuse me for not so high level of my language and explanation of the processes in the Middle East. I'm a journalist, and what I want to say is more closer to the people, not academia persons. So also I will speak on the most popular language in the world, bad English. So excuse me before starting. Yes, indeed, I don't want to be a lecturer in the academia meaning. I prefer to have a conversation, questions, answers, because I also have questions. Maybe will be more interesting to all of us to speak each other about these issues, because yes, the topic is very wide. We will speak about the European Union and the Arab world, and the both they are in crisis, they are in turmoil right now. So we can point some parts of this topic can be more interesting to the audience. I prefer to present one picture of this topic, and after that we'll start discussing or just talking about this topic. Well, for me it's difficult to be so optimistic or to say good things today, because as I said, both Arab world and European Union are not at their best conditions. And actually, what is lack in European Union is self-criticism. And this is very visible from the recent foreign policy moves, not only as bloc, but also as member states. So we can point some of these member states, and after that, why some parts of the Middle East and North Africa are more interested to European countries than others. At the beginning, let's see what is the situation now from European perspective. And I should note that I have also subjective opinion on these topics. So I will say that before the whole conversation, because this is important for the audience, that I'm someone with personal opinion on these topics, and maybe I'm subjective. But turmoil in the Middle East and North Africa directly affects Europeans. This is something Europeans don't understand very well. Yet their influence in the region has never been weaker. As I said in the beginning of this conversation, the region has been in flux since the wave of Arab uprising began more than 10 years ago, experiencing revolutionary movements, the end of some kind of authoritarian rulers, and repeated attempts by established elites to crack down on movements and so-called actors of change. So despite the considerable economic and political partnership with regional players like Egypt, for example, Europe has been unable in influence the major shift that have taken place in the region. This failure has often come at a high cost for Europeans and the European Union as a political bloc. Today, civil wars are still raging with different dynamics and intensity in Libya, Syria, and Yemen. And the central authorities look increasingly shaky in several other countries too, like Tunisia, because we are experiencing witnessing right now a turmoil and political crisis in Tunisia after the recent moves from the president. So this is a big question, for example, for France, but it's not a big question for other member states. And this is one of the reasons why the European Union still have no foreign policy, united foreign policy, a common foreign policy. This is one of the questions should be discussed inside the bloc. And popular discontent has provoked large-scale public protests in Algeria, which is also very important to France and Italy. Iraq, Lebanon is also, as you know, one of the zones of influence of France. Sudan, which is very important and very interesting country, not only in the context of relations with United States embargo or the recent history of this country, but Sudan is important also for Russians and for some of the European powers. So I think this is one of the interesting parts of this discussion, Sudan. And the Middle East and North Africa appear this time, how to say, for further discord and upheaval in the coming years, reflecting the core reality that the political, economic, and social drivers of the uprisings 10 years ago remain as strong as ever. It is only illusion that such turmoils are just left. They are still there, and the main problems facing these countries are still there. They are unresolved. So meanwhile, the upheaval has created openings for increased external interference and fed the forces of extremism and destabilization, because in such context, many groups, from criminal groups to extremist groups, they have a platform to operate and to grow up. So this is another problem for European Union, but unfortunately, still today, we have no common policy from European Union how to resolve such problems. We have local decisions like the France activity in the Sahel region. We have also Italy policy in Libya and different parts of Sahel like Mali. We have Danish, actually, activity in Mali and Sahel, but we have no common European policy. And yeah, the European Union and in any coordinated fashion, its member states are today essentially nowhere to be seen on the series of interlinked regional crises that have such a powerful impact on their interests. This is one of the strange moments here. Chief among these has been the displacement of millions of people seeking protection from the conflicts we mentioned, including Sahel and Sub-Saharan Africa. Violent conflicts, many of whom have sought refugee in Europe. Europe is still the main destination for such people, and they're trying even they risked lives just to arrive in Europe. This has been accompanied by terrorist operations across European cities. You know, the events from Paris and Brussels and also in Manchester are carried out by the Islamic State group, and this organization is still not defeated, despite all political statements, both from Russia and European states and even United States, because United States still have forces on the ground in Syria and Iraq, and they, in the same time, they announced that the operation was successful. Yes, Islamic State lost their territory in Syria and Iraq, but right now they are building some kind of territory in Sahel region, Nigeria, and the Chad Lake region. So this can be underestimated, because it's very very dangerous for any country with interests in these countries. We can mention Mozambique. We can mention also all the countries in Sahel region like Mali, Niger, Chad. Even Libya have some kind of movement of Islamic State fighters there. So the problem is still here. Even 3 years ago, the victory over the group was announced in global level. So with the region in desperate need of stabilization and reforming influence, and the United States increasingly uninterested in involving itself in the region's problems, one might have expected the EU and its member states to take up a prominent role in support of these objectives. Nothing like that. However, across the region's many flashpoints, Europeans are largely bystanders. With the Syrian war is how to say, it's a prime example of this. Because till today, the main factors, the main players in Syria are not European countries. And in the limited instance in which it has engaged in the Middle East and North Africa region, the EU has focused on short-term transactional policies designed to address the migration crisis. This is the most important topic for European member states of the European Union, and the threat from terrorism, rather than underlying causes for such instability, which is the main topic here. If you want to stop terrorism, you should stabilize the countries in trouble. Here, in European Union, the bloc has primarily addressed its concern through the externalization of European border control, you know, about Frontex, and the local cooperation between border guards and Frontex, which is also problematic because of many murky moments in this cooperation. Yeah, you know about the deal between European Union and Turkey, which is also bad for European policies. Actually, this is a, how to say, self-trapped in this deal. And limited participation in anti-ISIS military efforts, because excluding maybe France and United Kingdom, European states decided more to provide trainings and military equipment, but not participating with airstrikes or directly involvement in this anti-ISIS campaign in Syria and Iraq. Yeah, meanwhile, what to say, Europe's one regional success story, the nuclear agreement with Iran, has morphed into failure. That is the word for this. I don't expect anytime soon a successful story of re-enabling this nuclear agreement with Iran, because the reality now is very different 10 years ago from now. Europe's response to the United States withdrawal from the agreement during Trump presidency and its maximum pressure. This is the short explanation of the foreign policy of Trump administration towards Iran and other countries. Failure to muster the necessary political capital and economic resources to fulfill European commitments and to sustain Iranian compliance with this deal. Even in North Africa, where Europe has stronger influence by virtue of economic ties, Europeans undermine their own positions by focusing, as I said, only on short-term concerns and on technocratic fixes that lack local support, which is very crucial for that. And on the final words, Europe appearing inability to find mutually beneficial way to working with countries in North Africa and Middle East also, and those elsewhere in the region, has been accentuated by other powers' growing interest in the region. And these powers have provided Middle East and North Africa states with an opportunity to diversify relationships away from their traditional European partners. You can mention China, we can mention Iran, we can mention Russia, also other states from Asia with interests, for example, in Algeria. And the EU reluctance to engage in deeper or more sustained political involvement in the region has allowed also the Russian Federation, as well as powers such as Iran, as I said, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, also United Arab Emirates, which is very interesting player, greeted freedom to strengthen their alliance. And unless they adjust, Europeans will become increasingly irrelevant. And that is the end of my first words of this topic. Very wide topic, but very important. And I think in the next 2 years, we are still discussing these topics.
Thank you very much. And now I would ask I would ask Amal if he can share his thoughts with us as well. And I also want to ask you a question regarding something interesting that Ruslan said. I'm going to paraphrase it. Europeans do not understand Arab countries, but can we say that Russia does?
Russia.
Yes, Russia.
Okay.
It is a question for Amal. Is he with us? I believe he is.
Well, in my opinion, because I'm half Syrian, among every other things, I felt the war in Syria personally, but also professionally. And yes, I have different opinion on Russian foreign policy, but it should be very dumb to say that Russia don't understand Arab world. I think Russia is understanding the Arab world better than European countries. There are different reasons about that. One is the lack of colonization history, which is very big burden for European policy and actually local governments and local people, which is more important because the elites in Arab world, we can say that about Egypt, for example, or Tunisia, they have very strong links to France or to Italy and to the United Kingdom, but the local people have mistrust of Europeans. I saw that with my eyes in Tunisia before a few years. I wanted to make a movie in Libya, but because of the war and fighting, I left for Tunisia. And how to say, when your embassy, which in that context I speak about the French embassy in city of Tunis, it is like citadel. I mean, the message is clear that this embassy is not only representative of France, but also the French influence over the country, not with country, but over. And this is one of the successful story of current Russian foreign policy, in my opinion. Russia don't try to represent itself as a ruler. They present a representative as a partner, which is important also for the local people. Russian culture and Russia sounds very far to local people, but is better choice when you speak about Europeans. This is a kind of mentality also, which is reflected also the foreign policy. So the short answer is, I think Russia understands better Asia and Middle East. This is because of history and political engagement and this lack of colonization period.
Well, unfortunately, Amo he has a very important call, and he will be back very shortly with us. But before that, we say that actually the topic is very, very broad and I would say debatable enough. And so I will also allow myself to add a few words. The truth is that this topic is always going to be relevant for us. The EU-Arab relations will always be relevant due to one fact: geography. Europe and the Middle East, they're doomed in a metaphorical way to walk a path together. And actually, the paradox is that we do not understand each other, as well as you said, more than ever. If you look at history, we will see that we have always seen each other as strange foreigners, and this is at the best levels. But despite that, I'm absolutely sure that we have a lot of common interests on the international arena, and because of that, I think that we should have a common vision for our future. or at least build such kind of a vision. It should be better. It should be fulfilled with hope, with prosper. But yes, we also have our worries. And I also think that this is we should use the word that is going to define our relations. The key word here is going to be future. And only through cooperation, we can make this future possible. And the big question here is, how should we proceed? From where should we start? And maybe even, should we do it alone? Should we not include, for example, Russia in this format? Yes, we have our differences. We all know that Russia-West relations are not in their best time. But that doesn't mean that we don't have common interests, especially in this region. And for example, we all want stability in the region, because without it, there are going to be consequences, negative consequences, and even endangering national security consequences for all sides. Europe is afraid from a new migration wave. Russia is focused on preventing spread of terrorism on its territories. The Middle Eastern countries could not develop if there is constant war on their territories. And the key for stability is actually, for domestic stability, I would also add, is to ensure a better future for the young Arabs in their own countries, through education, through investments, political stability, of course, freedom of development. And I think it's also important to keep in mind the international context. After the turbulent 20 years since the end of the Cold War, the United States are now actually struggling to somehow distance themselves from the region. We all know that they're focusing now on China, leaving its defense to countries that are, let's say, on friendly terms with Washington. But also many of those regional allies have a number of issues between them. I doubt that I doubt that this could lead to better stability if countries like Saudi Arabia, United Emirates, or even Turkey start something like a competition for leadership in the region. And this could lead to more chaos, more security dilemmas, and etc. China, on the other hand, is focusing more on infrastructure, on the infrastructural aspect, on the economical aspect. Although its role is growing in the region, we should also consider that China has never have had cultural traditions with the Arab world, and still has no, let's call them, existential interests in the Middle East region. And this is why Russia and the EU should, I think, work together. And I think that they can work together, because the truth is that we cannot resolve anything at the current moment in the Middle East without Russia's support, or at least without Russia's involvement. But Russia should also understand that they could not resolve anything without EU's help in the future.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yes, I would also like to discuss a little bit about that. Can Russia and the European Union cooperate together in the Middle East?
Oh, the short answer, in my opinion, is no, not now. They have very different visions. I mean, first of all, the Russian Federation is currently really way more active than European countries in Middle East. European countries are warring for two things now, economic and migration. And migration is somehow connected to extremism in European countries. I mean, the policies are constructed in that way that migration is linked to extremism, and this is a not good message to people trying to reach Europe right now. Europe is standing aside. I mean, for now, I see no policy good enough to re-establish the influence of Europe in Middle East in this level to be considered a real player on the ground, because the Russian Federation needs to cooperate with equal partners. Europeans are not the same way in Middle East, maybe in Eastern Europe, but not in the Middle East. Many times I speak with colleagues and other analysts about these trends, and I'm amazed that unfortunately even big names in our field don't see the big picture. I mean, in our century, this is very important for any kind of analyst. When you speak about Ukraine, you can't speak only for Ukraine. You should speak about Moldova, you should speak about Central Asia, you should speak about Caucasus, because this is a big picture. And when one country trying to influence others, the country will try with every tool possible. Europeans are very, they think in only one way right now. I mean, they are afraid, for example, for economic pressure or gas supplies, but the picture is bigger than that, because such economic links are equally beneficial for Russian Federation and European Union. That is the truth. I mean, political statements are something one, but the other hand is reality. In the Middle East, European countries are really far away from Russian Federation right now. We see also the changing of the landscape in the Cold War, saying that we have two powers, for example, the Soviet Union and the United States of America, which is not the full picture. But let's say we had two powers. The landscape now is really different. It is fractured. I mean, we have right now the ambitions of Turkey. We have the regional policy of United Emirates. We have also the rising stars of the new nationalist power in the region, Saudi Arabia. When I visited Saudi Arabia before 3 years, I saw a country changing from religious to nationalist motion. This is partly because of the current policy of the Mohammed bin Salman and the circle around the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. And I went to Mecca in one of the places where the king is going during summer, and in this palace in Mecca, I was with journalists from Central Asia and the Balkans and few European countries. We were invited to meet the King Salman and Mohammed bin Salman, and it was interesting that inside the palace we saw two main groups of politicians and ambassadors from Russian Federation and from China. This is very indicative, because at the same time we went to the 911 center in Jeddah and Mecca, where Saudi police and security forces practicing with Chinese software and advised by American soldiers. But behind the doors, they spoke with Chinese and Russians. This is very indicative for the events came after that, because after 2017, Saudi Arabia signed deals with China for billions of dollars, I think 20 billion. And they strengthened the links with the Russian Federation. We know about the exchange of visits between Putin and Mohammed bin Salman. This is very important, but I am not sure that European Union understand this new dynamic in Middle East. Maybe North Africa is better in that context for European perspective, because France and Italy have very wild networks in the region, and we can mention Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, also Maghreb, I mean Morocco. But this is only a consequence of the former colonial power there. Even now, French trying to exit from Sahel region and staying only on economic level, which is not enough to stabilize one country. And this is where the Russians are coming. I mean, we are expecting a new deals in Burkina Faso very soon. This is one of the behind the door discussions between Russia and Burkina Faso. We have also this new mission to Mali, where French are still feeling pressured by the new players like Russia. And this is normal. I mean, maybe I'm not a fan of this policy because I have different view, but I should be dumb to not recognize that. I mean, the European Union right now is very weak in that meaning.
So I'm always here with us, and I think you can express what do you think on the topic, and also a very interesting point. The European is weak, Russia is strong, but what Russia has more from the than the European Union?
Thank you to the question. Sorry that I was interrupted by a very important person. And thank you one more time for the invitation. My name is Amal Vildanov. And regarding to terrorism, of course, this is one of the most important issues, problems of our world. And recently, according to scientific observations, the focus of terrorism has shifted from the Middle East towards the Sahel region. And of course, Russia is very worried and trying to make important decisions to overcome this issue. But the Sahel region is out of our reach, of Russian Federation, due to absence military bases in Central Africa, in Central Sahel region. Yes, and I have a question due our topic of conversation, not just about terrorism and about migration. As I know that, as I see this problem, that issue of migration will be unresolved for a long time in view of the confrontation between two civilizations, East and West. So, but due to Bulgaria, how many more migrants have been in Bulgaria from Arab Spring since 2011, if we take percentage?
Oh, currently there are very few. I mean, even in the peak of, if you are asking what is the situation, for example, with migration here in Bulgaria. We have different two realities. One is the reality, another is the political reality. In Rio, we have small increase in migration flow from Afghanistan, but I think this is just temporary because the reality is that Afghanistan will be stabilized very soon. Doesn't matter if someone is liking that or not. Bulgaria right now have no problems with migrants, but if we speak about political statements, Bulgaria is in the midst of a storm, and the migrants are trying to steal our food from basements. And you can imagine Walking Dead scene and footage. I mean, political statements are very dramatic, but the reality, because I monitor also the migration flow. I went to the Turkish border and also to the Serbian border between Bulgaria and Serbia, and the increase is very small, but it is neglectable. yes, this is a business. I mean, smugglers are criminals. So that is another problem. This is another topic to be discussed: the corruption, because Bulgarian border guards are also very helpful with smugglers. But this is, as I said, different topic. Unfortunately, the main focus of European politics right now is migration. I mean, this is dumb. This is stupid. Because the migration policy can be very, very easy to take care of. Maybe sounds like apocalyptic topic, because migration and the climate refugees are still expected to become more serious issue for every country. But this is also manageable threat. What I'm very curious what will happen with the terrorist activities. I mean, we have serious increase in this activity. Even after all moves against the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, still today, for example, Bulgaria have no good plan how to manage such threats. This is maybe another topic, but it is also part of our discussions right now. And Russia also have very bad history with terrorism. Maybe this is one of the few points currently equally important both for European countries and Russia, and they should act together on this issue, maybe also including Turkey. But Turkey and Russia is a different story, very interesting story, but maybe not part of this conversation.
Well, I can also say several words. Actually, when we're talking about the European Union, especially about those waves, migrant waves, we need to understand that from 27 countries, we have 27 different views of what should we do and how should we do it.
Yes.
I would also like to consider a more specific case, Libya.
Oh, yes.
On the one hand, France is more on the side of Marshal Haftar.
Yeah.
While Italy is on the side of the government, the current government.
Yeah.
Germany has something like, maybe if not clear, if their position is not that clear, they're at least trying to balance between them. So my question to both of you is a common European position possible, even when some of the strongest European countries, France, Italy, Spain, or Germany, have different positions?
Amal, please.
Yeah.
Let's be
Let's start.
first. Yeah.
I should unmute you. Yes, sorry. Try now. Yes.
I know that it's very hard to accept immigration flows to even the, as you said, the strongest countries of European Union. I know that Bulgaria is situated in the safe place in Europe, and nothing there is to scare. But as for me, as I said, due to confrontation to civilization and West and East European countries, if they will receive and accept migrant flow to their countries, they need to have strict rules for them. I know it's a very big more question, what is true and what is real, but everyone should have a simple understanding of this problem, and so that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruslan?
You want to discuss Libya?
Yes, or to be more precise, how can we build a common European position?
Oh,
all Middle Eastern countries, or at least conflicts.
European countries tried many times to to make that. I'm speaking so pessimistic because I want to see a common European policy, but there are no signals for that. Libya is encyclopedic example for such a failure. This is a failure because of the interests of both personal interests of the European leaders and countries' interests. Macron have policy in Libya which is in opposite direction of that of Italy's. I mean, for now, the southern part of Libya is currently under the influence of Italy. They trying to build some bases in southern part of Libya, which is an issue to France because France see itself as a European power in this region, but Italy have different view. I mean, even in support of Khalifa Haftar or the Tripoli government, we saw different positions. For example, Italy, they presented themselves as supporters of the international recognized government in Tripoli, but also stayed silent on the siege by Khalifa Haftar before 2 years, and they didn't criticize such moves. So this is part of Italy's policy in Libya. France, on the other side, is cooperating very visibly with Emirates. Russia also have very, they support for sure Khalifa Haftar, but at the same time, they established talks with Tripoli-based government. Even Turkey and Russia have different opinions how to manage the crisis in Libya. They tried to establish influence zones in Libya, and in that way, they actually that is one of the interesting points. They stabilized, for example, the coastal part of Libya. But in the south, the situation is very difficult to be manageable, even for Russia or Turkey. Actually, Turkey and Russia are more situated in the north part of Libya, but in the southern part, Italians have better positions, which is very, very maybe strange for some people to hear that. But Italy, yeah, they want to return to Libya, how to say, not in, I hope not in the colonial meaning, but Germany tried to unify European countries in a context of Libyan war, but it was a failure. I mean, maybe this year, if elections hold, we can speak more about what is going on in Libya and who are the most influencers in the country. But for now, it is it is dead end. I mean, no movement right now. There are no clashes, but we have very dynamic diplomatic activity.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, Amo has to go now because he has a very important test. And thank you very much for his participation. We can continue with questions from the audience. And before that, I remind you, you should raise your hand, and we're going to give you opportunity to ask your question. Thank you once again, Amo. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Do we have questions from the audience?
By the way, you can share my contacts freely with everyone who wants to continue conversations. I will be happy.
They can write me every time.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
So maybe I'm going to start with my question. I really wanted to say something positive. Okay, so we have one question. Beatrice.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Mr. Trad. It was very interesting to hear from you, your report. As long as I'm not a specialist and I'm not an expert on Middle East, so it was quite interesting to hear your topic. I have a question, and I think this is a question that we ask our guests on our seminars. It's about future perspectives. So what are the possibilities of partnership or future perspectives between EU and the Arab countries, and who, most important thing, who in your opinion should and would take the initiative for such partnership? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, even decision makers are not specialists on Middle East right now. If we judge from stupid decisions in that region, the problem is that there is no European foreign policy. We have French, German, Italian, Czech, Polish, Hungarian foreign policy, but we have no European foreign policy. In that meaning, and judging from the latest event, I mean, Europe should step up because we have new reality in Middle East. We have countries like Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Don't forget about Israel. Don't forget about Iran. Iran is absolutely the winner in the recent events in Middle East. Even that is hurting interests of European countries and other countries in the region. But we have a very fractured landscape, and European Union should present such a policy that the region powers and Arab League to consider partnership with Europeans, because for now, European Union is the image of the bloc is mostly linked to humanitarian aid. People don't need only blankets; they need more than blankets. And regional powers, like I mentioned, Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they are they have honor. I mean, they feel that they are rising stars on the global level, and the European Union should start conversations with different countries on different levels, not general politics, because there is nothing like that. There is no European policy. It is only on paper, and the biggest countries, the most influencers in the European Union, like France or Germany, they should start conversations personally with leaders in Middle East. And that moment is very soon.
Thank you very much. We have two more raised hands. The first one was from Martin.
Yeah, so my question is, what is the EU's position on Turkey's presence in the Middle East, taking into consideration that Turkey is a NATO member? And does Turkey represent the alliance's interest in the region? Also, one more question. How does Turkey influence the relations between the Arab states and the European Union? Thank you.
Well, the European Union is very worried about the recent events. I mean, oh my God, I start laughing on these statements because you know about the deal between European Union and Turkey. That's all. I mean, after such a move, you should not expect respect from Ankara. I mean, when you try to solve every problem with money, this is not a policy. For sure, European Union is worrying about the Turkish influence, but NATO is different topic. Even with the recent problems between Greece and Turkey, between France and Ankara, Turkey is considered a stable member of NATO, especially when we talk about countering Russian influence. Because Turkey is using NATO and NATO is using Turkey, more precisely, United States of America is using Turkey, and in the opposite way too, in Central Asia and southern part of Caucasus. We have example from Afghanistan. We know that United States are using Turkey to establish more influence in the region, which is very crucial to Russian Federation and also for China. And in the same way, Turkey is very happy because it is a way to establish influence in countries they consider it pan-Turkish. Yeah, and you know about this pan-Turkic council, and Turkey is trying to establish better links with Kyrgyzstan, with Turkmenistan. Tajikistan is different story because it's the only non-Turkic country in the region. But in that meaning, I'm surprised that European Union have no policy of what is happening with Central Asia, because Central Asia is the next focal point, and including for the distribution of energy, of movements of goods, and the China influence in the region. And in the same time, Turkey is also influencing Arab states if we judge from the recent meetings between Turkish officials, Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and also there is a rumor for establishing better links with Israel, which is very different and difficult topic inside Turkey. And Syria is one of the examples, but Libya is more crucial of what is the ambition of Turkey in the Mediterranean region. I mean, we can speak about so-called zones in Syria, established in cooperation with Russian Federation, but in Libya, we saw the current ambition of Ankara in the region, and that should be both problem and possibility for European countries, how to cooperate with Turkey, because there is no other way. I mean, we are here.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, I sent in the chat section Ruslan's site.
I will write
website.
Also in my email, and you can reach me in Facebook also with the same name.
Thank you very much. We have two more questions. The first one is from Kiril Avramov.
Yes, thank you very much for the discussion. It was very interesting for us to hear some new things about the region. You mentioned something about the position of the European Union in Syria. Now, we know that the European Union is not that involved in the Syrian Civil War crisis, except to say that it provides some humanitarian support to the locals. But the question is that I would like to ask, of course, is why the European Union did not manage to take part in the regulation of the Syrian Civil War, and why it isn't thought to be one of the key actors in this regional conflict. What prevented it from conquering some, let's say, political positions there? Yes.
I propose to her another questions too, and
okay.
Yeah.
Valentina, you have the.
Yes. I once again wanted to thank you for your speech and for all the discussions that happened. So my question is, what can the EU contribute towards de-escalation between Israel and Palestine? And is there a threat to the Union in the case of an armed conflict?
Okay. I will mention again that because we have limited time here, if you want to continue our conversations, I will be able on email, Facebook, and Twitter, or every other platform. About Israel and Palestine, European Union is currently more on Palestine side, but the lobbying of Israel state is very strong in Brussels. In that meaning, by the way, this is one of the few successful stories coming from European Union in the Middle East. The Palestine question is very important for political establishment in European Union, and especially in Scandinavian northern countries. Sweden is very active on that field, which provoked some problems between Israel and Sweden because of the pro-Palestinian stance. France is also very active, and they tried to be a mediator, but Germany is also some kind of mediator here. But for now, despite all efforts, I don't see any serious diplomatic activity, especially about the status of Jerusalem and the recent clashes in Gaza Strip. Some European governments are silent about the situation there, and that is very big problem because Palestinians will try to establish better links with countries not so pro-European like China, for example, or Iran. Iran is very big player here. I believe that European Union can be a mediator here because European states have a long history of successful moves in that conflict. So I believe in this role of Europeans. On another question about Syria, why United, why EU don't participate more actively in resolving the Syrian conflict. I believe that this is another consequence of the lack of united foreign policy, because we have different views in European capitals of what's happening in Syria and how to manage the crisis. Humanitarian aid for me is just very small part of how to manage this situation and how to help or to participate in resolving the war. But Syria is very strong example of failure of European Union in Middle East. There are many possibilities, but right now the players are very different from European countries.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for at least one more question that by tradition is going to be from me. So, okay, we somehow understood that there is no common European policy. We have 27 different national policies when we're talking about the Middle East, but still there should be a starting point for somewhere. And my question is, where should be the starting point? What should be the starting point? Who should be the starting point? The European Commission or some national states, for example, Germany that have, or France that have lots of interest in this region, or the initiative should come from the Arab states? How do you think?
About the common foreign policy?
From where should we start to build?
I think bilateral relations is better starting point than discussion in European Parliament or Commission. I mean, France and Germany, they they have good start to that in discussions of the common defense policy of Europe. For now, it is in nowhere, but at least we have small steps in that direction. Establishing such relations, I think, is more fruitful than pan-European discussion of what should be this foreign policy. I mean, such a move should be more localized and then establishing a network of opinions among the member states, and should be not so public. I mean, asking the public for everything is not every time good, especially for security, foreign policy, and defense. So Germany and France started that discussion before a few years, and despite the small steps, it's something.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to host you and talk about the European Union and Middle East. And I actually think it was a very interesting gathering, different from the other ones that we already held. I want to thank to Ruslan for accepting our invitation, and to Aman who actually left. Thank you both for the interesting discussion. We really hope that there are going to be more meetings like this one. And thank you all for participating in our seminar and for your questions. And we hope to see you next time on our next seminar, where a current member of the European Parliament, Svetlana Penkova, is going to be with us live from Brussels and talk about the how Europe works from the inside. And maybe she's going to be able to answer us, can we make a common foreign policy of the European Union? Thank you very much.
We will very optimistic conversation, I believe.
We should always be optimistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation and amazing questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.